Hi everyone, welcome to Javaras. Let's continue our discussion of Spring IOC container. In this video, we are going to look at configuration and bean annotations. So we have used stereotype annotations to define the beans, but we can have more fine-grained control while defining or while creating the beans using bean annotation. So let's say we have a project config class and we annotate it with configuration annotation. Now we can use project config to create application context, or we can provide this configuration into existing application context as well. Now in this class we can create a method which will return a book service, and we can annotate it with bean definition. Whenever we do that, this book service will be available to the IOC container. So whatever this method returns, that will be available as a bean of type book service to the Spring IOC container. So I have already created a project. In the pom.xml file, I have specified Java version 17, and I would specified Spring context dependency with version 6.0.11. So in the resources, we don't have any XML file because we are not using XML anymore. I have main class inside main package, and in the main class, we have a public static void main method, which is starting point of the application. Then we have a project config class inside config package, book service class inside services package, and book service has an instance variable of book repository, and book repository is another class which is inside repositories package. So if we want to create bean of book repository and book service, we can annotate them with @repository or @service annotation, and those are called stereotyped annotations. But we are not going to do that. We are going to look at bean annotation to create the beans. So let's see how do we do that. So first we need to annotate project config with configuration. So let's annotate it with configuration, and we can create a method here which will return a book service. So public book service, and we can do anything here, but for now let's return new book service. So we can customize this instance of book service uh, whatever the we will like, and then we can return that, and that returned value will be available as a bean in Spring IC container. And let's annotate it with bean. So that's how we create a bean using bean annotation. So that's the basic concept. Now we need to initialize the Spring IC container using this project config class. So in order to do that, we use annotation config application context class, which takes the project config or any any class with configuration annotation. So let's do that. So application context will be new annotation config application context, and here we will provide project config. Now we have created an application context. So we have specified that use project config class to create the application context, and this project config class defines this bean method. So this method will be executed and this bean will be available for us to use. Okay. So we have created the application context here. Now we can create application context using another method as well, which is specified below. We can create annotation config application context uh, without specifying any parameter using default constructor. And after that, we can use register method of that context to specify as many configuration classes as we want. So we can provide one configuration class, any number of configuration classes as we want. Also, we can use context.scan method as well, which is similar to at the rate component scan annotation which we have seen. So this will scan this package and it will uh, register all the beans defined by stereotyped annotations. And at the end we need to use context.refresh. So that's how we use it. So for now, let's just get book service from the context. Book service will be context dot get bean book service dot class, and let's print it out. And if we run it, we got the book service here, but the book repository is null. So now we need a way to inject book repository. So that's the next part, bean dependencies. So how to inject the bean dependencies? So whenever we have a method which is annotated with bean, we can just pass the parameter. So like here we have a parameter called book repository of type book repository. So any bean of book repository which is available in Spring ISO container will be injected to this method. Now this doesn't care how we create a bean of type book repository, whether we create it using XML, using stereotype annotation, or using bean method itself, that will be passed to this method. So let's see that. So this bean method, this book service method will take book repository, and let's create book service equal to new book service, and book service dot. So inside book service, let's create a setter method, set book repository. So book service dot set book repository, and we will pass the book repositories which we are getting from method parameter. And then instead of returning new book service, let's return book service here. So this should work. If we run it, we are getting error that no qualifying bean of type repositories dot book repository available, because we have not created a bean of type book service, neither using XML nor using uh, this Java configuration. So either we can use that with bean annotation itself. So let's get bean and public book repository, book repository. Let's just return new book repository. And if we run it now, you can see we have a book service and that has a book repository. Now that's how we use bean dependencies. Now let's look at receiving lifecycle callbacks. So there are a few ways in which we can use lifecycle callbacks. First is using interfaces. So we have seen this earlier in earlier videos as well, but let's look at it quickly. So we can use interface. So let's say for the book repository, we want to perform some action just after creating the bean and just before destroying the bean. So let's say just after creating the bean, we want to connect to the database. We can do that. And just before we destroy the bean, we want to release the connection from the database. We want to release some resources. We can do that. So for that, we implement one method, initializing bean. So this method is used if we want to perform some action just after bean has been created. So you can see the method name is after properties set. That means after all the dependencies of this book repositories have been set, all properties have been set. That means this bean has been initialized completely. Then what do we want to perform? So for now, let's just print this connect to database. And if we want to perform something just before this bean is about to be destroyed, we need to implement disposable bean, disposable bean annotation, sorry, disposable bean interface, and we need to implement this destroy method. So let's print out that close connection. And if we run it again, now we can see connect to database being printed here, but we don't see close connection being printed because we are not destroying the bean. So if we want to destroy the bean, we need to close this application context. So context dot close. But this close method is not available on application context. Instead, this is available on configurable application context. So configurable application context and the close method is available here. And if we run it, you can see connect to database, and just before we want to close the context, we get close connection here. The second method to use lifecycle callback is using annotations, and the annotations are post construct and pre destroy annotation. So post construct annotation is used to perform any action just after initializing the bean, and pre destroy just before destroying the bean. So let's do that. So this is the book repository, and let's not implement any interface. And here instead of override, I will use post construct. So post construct is not available with Spring context dependency. So we need to add my own dependency. So this is the dependency. So I will import it. So if you go to pom.xml, this new dependency has been added, which is javax.annotation API from javax.annotation group ID. And this will be pre-destroy. And let's remove this exception. So now the method name can be anything. So let's say init here, and let's say destroy here. If we run it again, then you can see it is working. Connect to database and close connection. So this is the second way. The third way is we can use bean attributes. So there are two attributes for bean annotation: init method, where we can specify the method which is used to initialize, and destroy method which is used just before, or which is invoked just before destroying the bean. So in this case, init method we are using foo. So foo method will be used just after bean has been initialized, and destroy method which is bar. So bar will be used just before the bean is about to be destroyed. So let's use those. So in the project config, or first of all, let's remove these annotations and remove pre-destroy annotation as well, and restart. So we don't see anything being printed because these methods are not being invoked. Now in this bean, the first is init method attribute, and let's say the value is init. So this should be the name of the method, and which is init. And the method which we want to run just before destruction of the bean is destroy. So let's use another attribute which is destroy method, and the name of the method is. So the method name can be anything. We just need to specify the correct name here. And let's run it again, and we can see the correct statements being printed. Now we can call these lifecycle callbacks programmatically as well, because we have the full control here. So let's say I don't specify the init method here. I only specify desktop method, and if we run it, we don't see uh, connect to database being printed because we have not specified init method here. But let's do this. Create book repository equal to new book repository, and now we can perform anything because now we have full control of this book repository bin, which will be available to the Spring IC container. Now the book repository has been created successfully, and now we can perform anything. So let's say book repository dot init, and then we can just return book repository here. And if we run it, it will work because this is just a regular Java code. So we are calling init method on book repository just after we have created the book repository here. And okay, so one more thing, let's not specify destroy method as well here. So when we use bean annotation, then there is one method called close. So if there is any method with the name close, and if that is present in that bean, so that will be automatically called just before destroying the bean. So you can see we are printing close connection, but we have not specified close to be destroy method in any configuration. So there are two methods called close and shutdown. So if these two methods are present, they will be treated as destroy methods, but you can override them. So let's say destroy method, you can override with another method name, or let's say if you don't want anything to run on destroy, then you can just leave it empty, and if you run it, then no method will be run on destruction of the bean. Okay. So now bean scopes. So the bean scopes works the same as stereotype annotation. So in the previous video we have seen bean scopes applied on stereotype annotation using @scope annotation. So you can watch previous video to learn more, and it also supports all custom scopes. So I want to uh, cover that here. And bean qualifiers. So bean qualifiers are also supported same as stereotype annotations, and it also supports custom qualifiers as well. So if you want to use a qualifier, just use qualifier annotation alongside bean annotation, and you can use custom qualifiers as well. Now there is primary bean. So we have seen in the stereotype annotation as well that we can use primary annotation to make any bean primary for that type. Same thing we can do with bean annotation as well. We can mark any bean as primary bean. Now we can customize the bean naming as well. So let's say you don't specify any name on bean annotation, then the default name is the name of the method. So your method name is book repository with a small b. So that will be the name of the bean. And let's say while creating the second bean, you specified my book repository with the bean annotation. So that will be used as the bean name. So the bean name will be my book repository. Let's talk about bean aliasing as well. So you can define many name for one bean. So you can pass an array of string. So let's say we pass three string my book repository and repo. So if you access any bean of type book repository with any of these names, so this bean which is returned from this function will be used. Now let's look at one more concept, which is injecting interbean dependencies. So let's remove this destroy method and everything from here, and remove these methods from book repository as well. So we have book service, and we need to inject book repository here. Okay. So here just let's return new book repository. Now in the book service, let's say we are not getting book repository from here. We know that book repository bean is also being created in this project config class, so we can just call this method, this book repository method. So let's do this. First of all, let's print it out, injecting and the book repository, and then let's say where book service equal to new book service and book service dot set book repository. Now we are calling book repository method twice, here and here. So what do you think would happen? You might think that we are calling book repository method twice, so two instances of book repository will get created. So the first instance will be printed here and the second instance will go to this book service. Let's try that. Now we can see injecting repositories dot book repository, and this is the pointer, and the book repository which is inside book service is also the same pointer. So one thing to note is that whenever we use bean annotated methods inside configuration, so they will be called by Spring ISO container, not by our method. So whenever we try to call a method which is annotated bean with bean and which is inside configuration class, which is inside a class annotated with configuration annotation, so Spring will, so the our code will not directly call that class or that method. What will happen that Spring will first determine if we have already called that method or not. So if we have already called that method, then we already have a bean which which was written from that method, and that bean will be injected instead of calling that method again. So you should understand this thing, that the method should be annotated with bean and that method should be inside configuration class. Otherwise it will be called in normal way. So let's say this is not annotated with bean, and if we run it again, then you can see these are two different instances. So first thing, this should be annotated with bean. Second, let's say there is no, or instead of configuration we have component annotation here, so this will also work. So instead of configuration you can have component scan as well, component annotation as well, but this is the difference which I just mentioned. If you refresh it, you can see this instance is different from this instance, so that's why we use configuration here. So the class should be annotated with configuration and the method should be annotated with bean. In that case, that method will be called exactly once in the entire life cycle of that Spring context or application. So you don't need to worry about, like, if you call this method multiple times then multiple beans will be created. No, they won't be created. If the scope is prototype, they will be created. If the scope is singleton, then they will be created only once. So the beans will be created according to the scope defined only. It doesn't matter how many times you call the method. Thank you everyone for watching the video. I will meet you in the next video. Until then, keep learning. Bye.